Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Shiv with 6. So as you can tell from the title, this video will be all about loadouts. I'm going to go through this video in two parts. So the first thing I'm going to do is look through all the survival skills and tell you a bit about them and whether I think they should be used on the loadout or not. And I'm going to separate them into three different categories. The first one is use. So you should use that perk. Second category, consider. You should consider using it. Or third category, you should avoid it. So absolutely shouldn't use it. No reason to, in my opinion, of course. And then the second part of the video, I'm actually going to be giving you some of my favourite loadouts when I go Shiv only. So I'm going to try and keep the video as short as possible, but this will probably be the longest one in the series because it is the first one, so it's establishing, you know, all the things you need to do before you actually even get into a match. So if I go into gear up here, go down to this blank loadout that I've got. Obviously, I'm not going to be talking through the weapons because you shouldn't be using weapons if you're going Shiv only anyway. So obviously those don't really apply. So let's go straight down to the survival skills then. So remember, my three categories are use, consider and avoid. So first, pistol auto zoom then. Nothing really to say on this one. Avoid it at all costs, like the plague. Yeah, no reason to use either of these. Okay, second one, explosion expert. Now this is going to be really good for your smoke bombs. I would say this is definitely a consider. It's not something you definitely have to use, because I feel like if you're accurate enough with your placement of your smoke bombs, you can bounce them off objects to begin the timer earlier and things like that. So I'd say consider this one. Also I'd just point out that you can, of course, unless you're using Bomb Expert 3, smoke yourself with Explosion Expert, so just something to bear in mind. Okay, Reviver, so 1, 2 and 3 here. Reviver, I would say avoid, because even Reviver 1, I mean, there's so many better 1-point perks that you can use with a Shiv only loadout, and in theory, if you're doing Shiv only, you should be going for flanks. You're not really going to be with your team, so to me Reviver is kind of a waste of points. So yeah, avoid Reviver. Brawler, avoid. No need to use Brawler. You shouldn't be punching people, and you're not going to have a melee weapon anyway, so yeah, avoid that. Covert Training. Okay, Covert 1 is really useful. 2 and 3 are also useful. I think Covert is a consider. Only from the point of view that if you're trying to get better at shivving, you don't want to rely on Covert the whole time. However, if you're newer to shivving, then I would recommend using Covert and eventually weaning yourself off it. Covert is kind of like a training wheels exercise, in my opinion. So yeah, definitely consider using Covert. Sharp Ears, brilliant perk, absolutely use it. Use it, use it, use it. One of the best perks in the game. Strategist. Again, a bit like Covert, good perk. Has its uses. Not useful in every situation, I don't think. Particularly the spawn one. I don't think spawning is that useful, because as a flanking player, you're wanting to try and stay alive as much as possible. So you shouldn't really be dying X number of times to be able to use the spawn. So maybe use Strategist too. So I'd say for Strategist, consider it. Hawk-eyed, avoid it. Yeah, avoid it really. There's no real need to use it. I mean, you might be saying to me, well, I want to mark people, but actually, if you're on the flank, you don't want to be marking people and giving away your position. So avoid that. Crafter. Yeah, this is an interesting one. I suppose if you really wanted to, you could give gifts, or be able to craft your shivs and smoke bombs faster. I don't really see a very good use for this. However, yeah, I think for me it would be an avoid, because I just think, again, there's so many better perks that you can use. First aid training. Okay, so we all know how useful first aid training 1 is. 2 and 3, not that useful in my opinion, because again, you're not really going to be with your team. So I'd say first aid is a consider. Sharpshooter, avoid it, you don't need it. Marathon runner, I'd say use that. And you might be saying to me, well, why would you be running if you're going shivs? But actually, it's the momentum you need to be able to do circle shivs and things like that. So marathon runner is a fantastic perk, and it's one of the perks that I use on my main loadout. Collector, consider it. Consider it, it's a good perk, gives you more parts. I do use it on one of my loadouts. It's very useful at times, but it's not the be all and end all. Executioner, use it, absolutely use it. Best perk in the game for shiving in my opinion. There's no reason to go without it, and yeah, you should be using Executioner 3. No questions on that one. Scavenger, avoid it. I think there's no real reason to use it. I mean, Scavenger 3, I mean, you get a random crafting item, but for 5 loadout points, it's not really worth it. Because it's only a sometimes, it's not an always. Damage marker, avoid that at all costs. Awareness. Awareness is actually a really good perk, and I think it's really underrated. I don't think it's necessarily the most useful for shiving, but I can see why it might have a use. I think you should consider it. Okay, Fortitude. This again is a bit of a controversial one. I think you should consider this, and here's why. As a 1-point perk, Fortitude is actually really useful, because not only does it allow you to bleed out slightly slower, it also increases your down crawling speed and gives you 25 parts after healing more than half health. Now, with a parts or loadout like I've got, it is a really good 1-point perk, so I think you should consider it. Gunslinger, avoid it, no reason to use it. Yeah, that's my overall view on that one. Bomb Expert, consider it. I personally don't like Bomb Expert and I don't use it, but it's pretty useful for smoke bombs and things. And we all know about Bomb Expert 3, I won't go into that. So consider it. Agility, use it, no reason not to, apart from maybe if you've got Lone Wolf on. I think agility is just beyond useful, so definitely use that. Lone Wolf, consider it. I think it has its uses, especially if you're away from your teammates, but again, because of the team oriented basis of this game, it's quite hard sometimes to get your Lone Wolf activated, so consider it. Second Chance, use it. It's a great perk. It's a 2-point perk, which actually has so many uses to it that I could not recommend it highly enough. Jack of all trades, in my opinion, you should avoid it. I mean, you might be saying to me, well, it's got all these perks on here, and I'm like, yeah, it has, but actually for those 10 points I could be using something so much more useful, so avoid that. Lucky Break, consider it, especially if you're doing number 3. Minimum of 3 crafting ingredients can be quite useful, so sometimes the boxes are a bit tight on the binding and the blades, so if you want to, I sometimes have a Lucky Break loadout equipped so that if I can't get much from the boxes, then I switch to this loadout and it starts to be more kind to me. I mean, I would pair this usually with either Crafter 1 or Covert 1. Okay, so consider it. And then finally, Lethal Efficiency, avoid it. No need to use it when you're going Shiv only, because you're not going to be doing special executions. Even if you have Executioner on, if you are purely going Shiv only, you won't need to use it. Okay, so that brings me on to some loadouts then. So my go-to loadout is Executioner 3, First Aid 1, Agility 2, and Marathon Runner 2. So that is my absolutely favourite loadout. Now, Marathon Runner, you can switch out for Sharpies, for example. So on smaller maps, I tend to be using Marathon Runner. On the larger maps, I might tend to use Sharpies. So Sharpies, I might switch out on Lakeside, for example, University, maps like that where you've got a longer space and more open ground to cover. It can be quite useful. Okay, next loadout I like using is Execution 3, of course, Collector 2, Lone Wolf 2, and Fortitude 1. So this loadout allows me to get as many parts as possible. And with a parts bonus equipped as well, the booster, this should give you about 1,000 parts per Shiv. Maybe a little less, maybe 800. So this is my loadout that I use when I want to get prepared for a comeback, so that every Shiv that I get up until the comeback is worth a lot more parts. So definitely use this loadout if you're looking for that sort of thing. Another loadout I like using is Executioner 3, Agility 2, Covert 1, and Lucky Break 2. So here you get at least 2 crafting ingredients, which is really helpful. Start with a Shiv on the spawn. Nearly impossible to hear while moving, and Executioner 3 we know about. With this loadout, you could switch out Covert Training for Crafter 1 to craft your things faster. You could possibly knock this off for First Aid Training. Could use some level of awareness perhaps, and then use the other point for an extra crafting ingredient. It's really up to you with these. These loadouts are very flexible. In terms of a covert loadout, if I was ever going to use it, I'd go with Agility 2, Executioner 3, and Covert 3. I mean, to my mind, if you're going to use Covert, you might as well go all out and use Covert 3. I don't see much use in Covert 2. I'd either go with Covert 1 or 3, personally. But I think this is the best loadout for new players. So if you're new to Shiving and you want to give it a go, Agility 2, Executioner 3, Covert 3 is the loadout. Okay, so one final loadout I might go with then, if you really want to use some more controversial perks, I would go with Bomb Expert 1, Explosion Expert 2, Executioner 3, and Agility. So you've got really short fuses on smoke bombs. Explosion Expert increases radius. And then the usual 2 here to allow you to have that mobility. But again, you don't have that healing, so you've got to be careful. So you could switch out Bomb Expert again for First Aid Training, if you want to. Yeah. Alright, well that kind of concludes it really. Those are my sort of go-to loadouts. A lot of them include similar sort of perks. But yeah, if you're looking to be better at shiving, I suppose, those are what I'd recommend. I'm going to put a few details in the description of what we've discussed, particularly the perks that I think you should use, for sure. And yeah, thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.